I mean, you don't have to go out and get a citizenship by investment. I happen to think that if I'm a crypto investor, the governments are going to be coming after me sooner than later for more tax. They're going to regulate me. I'm going to want a place to go. I think everyone should do something. And I think everyone should work with somebody because you don't want to make the mistakes.
It would also be good to just talk about what are some of the typical costs or some of the risks that we face when trying to pursue this approach. I suppose you might face additional scrutiny from tax officers for, going overseas and trying to do this kind of strategy. What's your view on that kind of risk and the costs associated with that?
Well, I have a business and we help people do this, and it was born out of my own experiences that I was sharing through Nomad Capitalist. People came to me and we've helped hundreds of people, from everyday entrepreneurs to multi-billionaires, to some very, prominent crypto people as well. And I think that, very rarely does somebody actually have a problem where, if you have a foreign bank account, for example, you have to legally report that if you're in the United States, for example. But you don't have to report privately vaulted precious metals if it's in a private vault outside of the country. You don't have to report foreign real estate if you're an American. Now, if you earn income, that would be taxable, subject to any tax credits from the other country where it is. So you want to go into it with the proper advice. And what I've seen is a lot of people who come to me, even they've been living overseas for years, they have accountants who don't know how to file out the simplest of forms, something that we would do, or we would work with people who do every day of the year. And so I think that you want to work with people who are very focused on international. I think you want to make sure you understand the rules. So if you're not American, and let's say you're Australian, or Canadian, there's a lot of talk, which is 5, 10, 20 years old, about the 183-day rule, for example. Just be in your country fewer than 183 days. Well, I can promise you, if you're nomadic and you're bebopping around the world 6 months a year and then you spend 181 days in Australia, they're not going to agree that you've left, right? So you want to have the most up-to-date information. You want to work with people who know this stuff. But I think if you do that, I mean, it is a commitment, right? Americans, to me, the biggest thing that trips people up is Americans talking about Puerto Rico. And you have so many people that comment that they're going to, you have to spend 5 or 6 months a year in Puerto Rico. And they say, oh, but you're in the US, you could just get on a pontoon boat and go somewhere else. You don't have to stay there. To me, that's just a bad idea. You have to commit to changing your life. If you want things in your life to change, you've got to change the things in your life. But if you commit to spending, let's say, 9 months a year in another country, you can dramatically lower your taxes. But you don't want to rely on people on some forum or people who are talking about something that worked in 2007, because as more people are doing this, tax offices are cracking down. There was a case where a guy closed down every connection he had to his country, but he forgot to cancel the rent on his space in the marina for his boat. The boat went with him, but the space in the marina continued to be rented, and the government successfully argued that he had an intention to come back. Otherwise, why would you keep this space in the boat? He took away everything. And so I think you really want to drill down on making sure you know what to do. And it really does require a commitment. This is not like some half-hearted thing. The best thing I tell people to do is actually make the move, so therefore on paper it looks like you're making the move.
And in terms of the typical costs that people would pay, I know this is maybe this is a little bit of a how long is a piece of string question, but if you could maybe just outline some range, I guess, in terms of the costs that people would pay to get, say, additional citizenships overseas to kind of structure their life in the way as you're suggesting.
Well, I think it's like anything. You go to a hotel, or you staying at the Ibis, or you staying at the Four Seasons, right? The Ibis, you come down, you take the frozen macaroni out of the lobby, you put it in the microwave, and you scan your little key card and they bill you a checkout. You go to the Four Seasons, they have 17 different people waiting to serve you. So you can set up an offshore company for $1,000. I think most of those companies, like in Belize, Seychelles, Marshall Islands, those are pretty much has-beens. You're not going to be very respected with those. I think onshore is the new offshore, and that's going to cost a little bit more money. The Caymans, the UAE, et cetera, those cost a bit more money. And so, when it comes to things like citizenship, something that's very important for a crypto investor, there's numerous ways to do it. It doesn't cost a lot to say, hey, my dad is Mexican or my grandmother was Italian, and then just work through either with a lawyer or someone like us, or even the embassy yourself, to go and get your passport. But when it comes to what a lot of crypto investors are doing, let's talk about passports. You want to go and get a citizenship in 6 months. If you're not a criminal, if you don't have a shady background, if you're from a good country, it's probably pretty close to 100% chance they're going to approve you in a country like a Dominica or an Antigua or a St. Kitts. And you're going to be looking at spending for a single person 100 grand and up for those, plus fees. If you're a family, 130 grand and up, plus fees. And those fees in many cases aren't cheap. And so again, I think it comes down to, for us, we work with 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs. We're generally, anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000, depending on the options people choose, and if it's one person or 7 people. We're probably closer to the Four Seasons than the Ibis, because it's built around what I wanted, right? Is having one person manage 7 different lawyers around the world. That could be substantially cheaper if you want to be your own general contractor. So I think it is kind of, it could range from all you need is a second passport, and you're going to go and live there and set up residence, and that's crypto friendly, and you get really lucky and it costs you a couple grand, all the way to you're a family of 4 and you want the Cadillac and you want everything quick and you want the best of everything, and it's going to cost you quite a lot.
And so I guess related as well is maybe there are different levels to this, right? So I think you're typically working with people who are at a more upper level. What are the, I guess, levels that you would say, like maybe there are people who try to do this at like a cheaper level, and then as you rise in your net worth and your income, at what point does it make sense to do it in the Nomad Capitalist style, let's say?
Well, I mean, you don't have to go out and get a citizenship by investment. I happen to think that if I'm a crypto investor, the governments are going to be coming after me sooner than later for more tax. They're going to regulate me. I'm going to want a place to go. I think everyone should do something, and I think everyone should work with somebody, because you don't want to make the mistakes. But what you might do if you're just, if you're not the 7- or 8-figure investor, is you might say, I'm not going to get citizenship by investment. I'm going to get a residence permit in a country like Portugal, or in a country like Mexico or something like that. Or I'm going to get what I call a paper residence, and I'm going to work towards citizenship more slowly, whether I need to spend time in the country or not. And that's going to be a lot less expensive, right? Because the legal fees are less, because there's a lot less due diligence than a citizenship by investment program has. The legal fees are going to be a little bit less, and there's a lot less to contribute. I think the challenge with a lot of crypto people, though, is, you'll have a guy who comes to you with $1 million. It's hard to suggest spending $150,000, 15% of your net worth, on a citizenship by investment. But if you think crypto is doubling in the next 6 months and you're an American, that $2 million net worth now qualifies you that if you give up your citizenship, you're a covered expatriate and you owe a whole bunch of tax potentially. And so it really depends. I mean, you could be a 6-figure guy, but if things are going through the roof very quickly, you might spend a disproportionate amount of your money. Whereas, I just had someone recently who's just a traditional entrepreneur. They've got $60 million in the bank, and we decided, $1 million for European Union citizenship in a year was not worth it, because their income and it's not going through the roof. It's very steady. So I think sometimes for crypto, you get stuck in kind of a catch-22 almost, where in order to accomplish what you want, you need a more expensive tool. And so I think that sometimes you spend a disproportionate amount of your wealth. But if you're not in a hurry, then I would say, look at something like setting up a residence permit that leads to citizenship. It's really hard to find good international tax people, honestly. There aren't that many. I've spent a lot of years doing it. But if you could find someone yourself, most of them, they have a problem. But I think from the citizenship perspective, that one's a lot easier. And the tax perspective, when it comes to crypto, as you know, most people don't know crypto. And then, of course, most people don't know international. So I think that one mistake people make is they get discouraged from doing this because they talk to a guy who doesn't know, who's exceedingly conservative, right? We're not trying to do anything shady here. We're trying to be fully above board. But obviously, some people don't know what they're doing, and it just they become too conservative.
Yeah, and so it's important to get the right information. And I've seen that there are different strategies available. So for some people, it's about, literally just going and living in a 0 or a very low tax jurisdiction. And in other cases, It's more like having a what's it called? A 3-country shuffle, or multiple countries approach. Could you maybe contrast and just outline some of the differences in those approaches and how to think about those?
Well, I think what people have often confused is they think about digital nomads, right? I'm not a big fan of labels. I like the label Nomad Capitalist because I came up with it, right? But I don't know, am I a digital nomad or not? I think the challenge I've seen is that people think digital nomads, you're always dragging a suitcase, you have 39 possessions. A lot of people don't want that, right? I mean, I have homes all over the world and I live in them and it's great. I don't have to stay in hotels and I have everything where I need it. And so what I created was the idea of the trifecta, which I think is a great way to live, which could be tax advantageous and I think is also lifestyle advantageous, which is you have 3 homes, whether you rent them or own them, and you spend 4 months a year in each. So that means that if you set up your taxes properly, you can potentially not get sucked into any of those countries' tax nets. You're contributing. I pay more in sales tax in Malaysia, spending 3 or 4 months a year there, than the average person pays in a full year of income tax. I don't take up a job. I'm not taking any jobs away from people. So, you can create value without paying income tax. And so I think that the trifecta is one way where I'm able to say, I'm going to spend some time in Europe and get my Europe in. I'm going to spend some time in Asia, consumer culture, fast, modern, the future. Where I am in Malaysia, super nice people. And right now I'm in Bogota, Colombia. I like the Latin influence coming from the US. They have a few of the tastes of home that I like to have every once in a while. And so I like to, I couldn't commit to just one of those. But also if I committed to live in Colombia full time, it would be a tax mess. So it's nice for both reasons to kind of enjoy the best of both worlds. However, there are countries where they have either zero tax, like the UAE, they have a tax exclusion, like Portugal for 10 years, or Uruguay, or places like that. They have a non-dom program, like in Ireland. They have territorial taxation, they have special crypto tax breaks. You can pick one of those countries and live there full time, or you can split your time up so that you don't become tax resident in an otherwise high tax country. So those are the options. You're certainly free to drag a suitcase behind you. I used to do that for years, a week or 2 or a month in every country. But I think a lot of people that I talk to who are higher level investors, they like the stability. And so you have the option of 1 place or 2 or 3, and you can split it up, and it gives you a lot of advantages.
Sounds really like there's options there in terms of how you want to go about this. Now, I think probably many listeners are thinking, okay, but I've got ties here. Like I have, my how would I raise my kids, or how would I look after my parents and my relatives who live here? What are some strategies that you use when, either for yourself or when you're dealing with your clients, on how they think about raising their children or dealing with family dealing with family?
Well, I think everyone's different, right? So in my family, I grew up in the Midwest in a very Protestant family. My parents gave me the permission slip when I was 12 years old. They were the ones, my father, who said, go where you're treated best. Don't think you have to stay here. You should go where the opportunities are best for you. You don't have to take care of us. And so I think a lot of people probably weren't that lucky. Their parents or their grandparents kind of expect for them to be around. And so what I say to that is, you don't have to leave your country forever. You're allowed to come back and visit. I think a lot of times, this is not tax advice because every country is different, but a lot of times it's better to come back for little nibbles over the course of a year rather than one big swath once. So you can come in and check in. What I say is, my wife doesn't understand this, but my family and I, we weren't seeing each other every day, right? So if you come back often enough, you're probably not seeing your family that much less. We have tremendous technology these days. You can talk to people from anywhere. How many friends did I have when I was in the United States? I lived in Phoenix, they lived in Chicago, they lived in Los Angeles, they lived in Kansas City, they lived in New York, right? I mean, was I abandoning them? So I think that that's something a lot of people are dealing with, especially in Western countries where people are very mobile. As to raising your own immediate family, I think having a supportive partner who's with you is good. If you're going to be having children, there are a lot of benefits. For example, most Latin American countries, if you give birth on their soil, your child becomes an instant citizen, and you can work towards your own second citizenship in a year or 2 in many cases. So you can start building your own global citizen family. And here's the reality, Stephan. They have schools pretty much everywhere you go these days. It may be shocking to some people, but they do have schools. Right now, by the way, with the whole pandemic, nobody's going to school. You're sitting at home on a computer screen. If you can sit at home, on a computer screen in Gary, Indiana, you can do it in Bogota, Colombia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, or Kathmandu. And to me, it's all about the mental barrier that people have. The U.S., I mean, this is what I talk about. The statistics don't lie. The U.S. has some of the worst schools in the developed world. So if the goal is to go where you're treated best, if the goal is a quality education, you probably ain't getting it where you are right now. That ain't, by the way, that's because I went to public school. So, I mean, if you want the best schools, you should send your kids to Korea or Singapore or Taiwan. That's where the best schools are. And I think that if you're making enough money, what a lot of people are going to start doing is hiring tutors. I talked about that, when I was dating Mrs. H, my wife, and the idea of hiring someone who travels and teaches the things that are important and follows a curriculum. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think for getting into the top universities, they like a rich, history of travel and different experiences and multicultural. So I quite frankly think that, the education is much better doing this. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.